Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar using fleet tech and PM compliance data to create measurable ROI. We're excited you could join us for today's session. My name is Megan Billingsley, and I'll be moderating today's event. Today, we're going to deep dive on how technology and data-driven compliance turn challenges into measurable ROI by reducing risk, cutting costs, and creating competitive advantage. We are thrilled to be joined by John Davis, Head of Delivery Fleet Maintenance with AMCS Group. Before we get started, I have just a few housekeeping items. Please note the slides will advance automatically throughout the presentation. To enlarge the slides, click the Enlarge Slides button located in the top right corner of your presentation window. If you need technical assistance, click on the Help widget located on the bottom left corner of your console. We encourage you to submit questions at any time throughout the presentation using the Q&A widget at the bottom of your console. We will try to answer these during the webcast, but if a fuller answer is needed, or if we run out of time, it will be answered later via email. Please know we do capture all questions. So to kick off, I'd like to ask our speaker to provide just a quick introduction of himself and his work. So John, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for your time today. We appreciate it. Yes, I've been doing this longer than I care to think, but I've been with AMCS and the predecessor company, Dossier, for 21 years with a singular focus of fleet maintenance software. And prior to that, I worked in the mass transit industry for another 19 years ahead of that. So I've been doing this my whole career as far as fleet maintenance. I also work with our development leaders in our organization to tie the real world to what we're developing and what we're inventing out there in the marketplace. So that's my primary job is that we deploy the software, we do the consulting, we get customers up and running. That's what my group does. So all of our people in our group have 20 plus years experience. So they're a very seasoned group, got some gray hair, but we're very proud of our team and what they offer and how they get people up and running. So thank you for your time.
Love to hear it. Thank you so much. So with that, then, let's get right to it. And just to kick us off, I think we'll start with a closer look at how compliance has evolved and why it's no longer just a box-checking exercise. Many fleets still view compliance as simple box checking, but compliance has become a major business issue. So John, why is it more critical than ever before?
Yeah, I looked at this number when we got this statistic back from Federal Motor Carrier, and I was blown away, frankly, by the number of vehicles that are having violations. I typically look at like the down, out of service, what a fleet's is when we're working with them, what's their out of service compared to the standard. But this is a staggering number to me, that 30% of vehicles that get inspected are failing in some way or another. It's impressive. So it's not just about your paperwork, right? And just saying, yeah, we did it, and all that. It's like, okay, well, if you say you did it, but you didn't do it, look at what we just ended up with, right? And it also has implications. Like think if you're in the freight business, right? You deliver freight. Well, your customer's upset if your truck doesn't run, or you pick up passengers, bus doesn't pick anybody up, waiting on another bus because the one broke down ahead of it. Or you pick up trash, the trash doesn't get picked up, the recycling doesn't get picked up. It does brand reputation damage. There's extra cost associated with all of that. So, and the other things it can do, if you skip services and skip work, you might void your warranty. Anything they can do, anything a manufacturer can do to rightfully so. If you didn't do something, they shouldn't honor the warranty, right? But if you did it correctly, then you're entitled to the warranty, right? And they can be very costly, those, unscheduled type repairs. When you miss inspections and miss preventive work, also the extra work, work that maybe you could have caught something earlier and it wouldn't cost you that much to do it, compared to, now that skipping that work has caused there to be extra problems. For instance, we didn't change the brake pads and now we've damaged the rotors because we let it go too far, right? Extra cost for no good reason. And sometimes it takes things out of service longer. There's towing. Everybody, my goodness, the towing charges that you see is just staggering. And it's, I know there's predatory towing out there, and, I read the stories about that, but just the cost of ones that aren't predatory, and just the cost of what it costs to keep one of those drivers out there running, and the equipment, the insurance, towing has gotten incredibly expensive. And depending on where you are, it's really bad sometimes. Roadside inspections, they're increasing, that they're levying more fines, more ways to get money out of a fleet when it's on the side of the road. And, if we do stuff ahead of time and keep things in good shape, we can avoid that, right? And I do think, like in certain lanes of trucking, the inspectors tend to know. They tend to know these companies do a pretty good job of their fleet. We rarely find anything, or every time those trucks come through from that company, I'm just using trucks as an example, could be any kind of piece of equipment. They consistently have problems, and so trying to avoid that, just cost avoidance of that, and also planning your downtime. It's very important. You may say, well, we do our work at night because the trucks run during the day, or the opposite. And if we can do that work and not have any planned downtime, then they're out doing what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to make money for us, or deliver a product that we have, or whatever it might be. And, we need time that the doing preventive maintenance in compliance, keeping things in compliance, we're going to have a direct impact upon the business as far as confidence. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as far as drivers and mechanics and those sorts.
Great insights. Thank you so much. Can I ask you, what are the biggest costs of noncompliance that carriers and fleet operators need to be aware of?
Well, we spoke about a little bit earlier. There is the obvious, right? There's 3 or 4 areas that I think that it normally impacts. One is your budget, right? You're not planning on a breakdown. You're not planning on these unnecessary costs. And once again, this number took me by surprise of up to $10,000. I mean, that comes from the compliance resource. And I was like, oh, that's a lot, right? And think about how one of the numbers that we've used for many, many years in this industry is that an unplanned breakdown, extra work, can cost you up to 4 times if that had been planned, because there's so many areas that it affects, right? It disrupts the routes. It creates overtime for drivers, for mechanics, if they have to fix what was broken down. Maybe there's refunds that have to be given to a customer for a service delay. It can also damage that relationship. Maybe they needed something to arrive on time, or whatever it might be. And sometimes you have to take work that was planned to be done, and now you've got to do the unplanned work because you need that piece of equipment to make a schedule or make a route, make a run, and you've got to juggle things around. So it can become a snowballing effect. And a lot of times, fleets don't track these costs directly. Like if you go into a fleet and you say, how much did you pay drivers overtime, or detention, or whatever it was because their truck broke down? It's hard. Sometimes they can tell you. Sometimes you have a good numbers, and the payroll system will tell you, but oftentimes you can't. It's very hard to put a number on the brand reputation damage, right? That our recycling didn't get picked up today, or this football team didn't get to the game on time. My goodness, how bad is that, right? I lived in that world for long enough in the bus business, right? So it's a big deal when things break down. Plus, there is some reputation damage when your piece of equipment sitting on the side of the road. One of the things that the PM compliance, it takes time. It takes a long, and it's only going to follow your PM schedule. My team does this every day. They visit about 30 customers a year, each and every one of them doing deployments. And we would never tell you how to run your fleet. That's your decision. When do I do the PMs? What's the schedules I should run? Because your environment, your operation, your makeup of equipment, all of that is specific. And you have an idea of when you want to do that. And it may be based not only on, you may base it on things like oil analysis or, sampling. You may make some of those educated decisions, but still, once you know what you want to do, you need to follow that. And you need an easy tool to be able to follow your plan and execute on it. And it can take a couple years, sometimes even longer, to get to a 90 or 95% compliance rate so that you're complying with your plan. I always liken it to this. The fleet didn't get sick overnight. It's not going to get well overnight. I didn't get a little overweight overnight. I'm not going to get, thin overnight, right? It doesn't happen that way. It takes time for both of those, right? So it, but you can get there, and with the right tools, you can achieve success.
Yeah, I'm sure all companies are interested in containing those costs of noncompliance. So just to follow up on that then, how does proactive tech-enabled compliance translate directly into measurable ROI?
So, most people know that doing preventive maintenance on time is going to save you money. There was an old saying used to say, "Pay me now or pay me later." It was, I think it was an oil change commercial or something like that, right? And essentially, that's what you've got here, right? You can skip on maintenance when the fleet's new for quite a while, and it may not affect you that first few months, might not affect you the first year or two too much, but it will eventually sneak up on you. And sometimes it sneaks up on you in the worst way, where all of a sudden you've got a whole pile of equipment that's not in the best shape. And you know, proactive preventive maintenance, it according to the fleet financials, it can extend the lifespan of fleets up to 50%. That number was kind of shocking to me, right? I had not heard that exact number before. When we got that number, it was like, wow, 50%. And also that affects resale values. But most fleets don't have good visibility into when are we doing this work on time, right? And sometimes it grows from, like, a fleet starts out small and they grow, and next thing you know, they got 100 trucks and they're still trying to do something on pen and paper. Or maybe they've got a homegrown system, that was adequate when they were smaller, but it's not able to keep up. Maybe you're trying to keep up with it with an Excel. But at some point, as you get larger and the work that you do becomes more prescribed and pinpointed, you would want a system to be able to tell you, I need to do this, and this is when I need to do it. The good thing about some of that coming forth is I sat on the new VMRS, that's the Vehicle Maintenance Reporting Standards. It's the Council of the Technology and Maintenance of the American Trucking Association. And for 3 years, we worked on a project with our with vehicle manufacturers, engine manufacturers, some large fleets. It was 75 of us on that team. And we finally got everybody to agree to proactive and predictive codes. So what's coming our way in the 2027 model year is some of the manufacturers now are going to tell us when things need to be done, not just based on some algorithm, based on actual sensing remaining useful life of whatever that componentry might be. And they'll tell us to do it, and we can do it ahead of time. Think about that. That's going to change really the way a lot of the fleets operate, because pretty much everything's been based on time or mileage, or, an event. It did this many gallons of fuel, or it did, whatever hours it ran or miles. But we're going to be able to see new ways to be able to do maintenance. And, even very large, sometimes the largest organizations are the ones that have the worst time getting it together, because they've become so diverse through acquisitions and whatever, that they've got it scattered, and they're doing, they got 50 shops and they're doing something different all across each one of those 50 shops. And it's very hard to see, what's that costing us? What's it doing for the long-term value of our equipment? And just having the knowledge that this needs to be done, or this is coming due, to help people be able to plan and to give them that. And then there's the accountability standpoint. So about 10, 15 years ago, we started seeing an industry trend in a couple of the verticals that we serve, most notably in the waste and recycling, and in the dairy and beverage delivery. And it was basically holding the local fleet managers accountable for their preventive maintenance compliance. And the way that worked was, say that I was the local manager for maintenance, and Megan's my manager, my overall general manager. They were making the general managers responsible, because they might be gone tomorrow, right? They may be going to run another division, but you're going to be stuck with that equipment, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, or even more in some sectors, right? You're stuck with it for a long time. And what you do today is going to affect the value of that. So those bonuses, I think, for people achieving the compliance, while it's a small amount of money that has to actually be paid out, just think about this. Say you save an engine or a transmission because you're doing things right. You could give just a fraction of that money to people, and the results are amazing. A good system, and there's several out there just like ours, that you got to make sure you got a system that they cannot manipulate your PM compliance. It is correct. It is, somebody can't go back and change history or say, oh no, we did it just so they can do it. So you got to look for that. You don't want people working the system. But outside of that, if you can monitor that, giving a reward, typically I find that works better than a penalty. But if you're so low on compliance and you can't get it done, then It may be time for a change, but typically a reward is going to work better for people, I think. And look what it's going to do for the overall fleet.
Positive reinforcement, yeah. And that's the kind of ROI that no organization can afford to ignore in today's resource-constrained environment. John, can you explain how preventative maintenance programs extend vehicle lifespan and improve uptime?
Yes. So, there's another statistic here I looked at when I switched over here, and it was this number was surprising to me as well. But then when I started, we've been working some numbers. So in our company, we've been around 46 years. That's a long time for fleet maintenance. There's only one other company that even comes close to that. So it's a long time. We have a lot of experience. We've been through many different iterations and versionings over the year, and we have to constantly move. And so we look at it and we say, you know what? What's the advantage of going from maybe a kiosk solution to putting tablets and phones in people's hands? And this number, we didn't pull this number, but this number was pulled from Aberdeen Group, backed this up, said the ROI on a fleet maintenance is 300%. That was mind blowing to me. But when we started doing this calculation for companies switching into a more modern, let's have a mobile device. I mean, we've had a mobile solution for 20 years, but let's face it, 20 years ago, there was no iPhone, there was no Android. So, now we're on modern platforms because, we'll talk about that, right? Mechanics and people, techs expect modern tools for them to be able to do their work. And so what we're trying to, so when we implement this, right, what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, what are the things that I can do that are going to make a difference, right? That once we get in PM compliance, and PM compliance isn't just, I changed the oil on time, or I did that inspection on, at the 10,000 miles, or DOT on time. It's things like, the componentry. I did an article for a trade magazine several years ago, and it was surprising because they came to us and they said, we're starting to see fleets go back to changing parts proactively. Whereas a lot of fleets, it seemed like it was in fashion to let the component fail, wait for the alternator to quit, wait for the starter to quit, wait for the turbo to quit. Well, everybody knows the problems that all of that causes, right? But that was sort of the case because it didn't cost that much to have something towed or fixed or whatever. But now that has really changed, right? The TMC from 2020 till the end of 2024, repair and maintenance costs on heavy trucks went up 40%. That's a staggering number, right? 40%. I know a lot of other things, increased as well, but that one hit me hard because it's industry, I've grown up in. It's a big number. So waiting for something to quit and then have to fix it on the side, that's helping to drive that big number that we saw at the beginning, right? So if we can get the data and we can see, what does a piece of equipment going to go? Is a starter going to get, it's very different, like in a city bus, how long it's going to run versus an over-the-road truck versus a city delivery truck versus a utility vehicle. All those things are going to have different, but you can get that number, right? You can say, oh, okay, we know that our average failure is at 700,000 miles. Let's do a preventive maintenance for a change at 650,000. And we'll avoid some of them. Yeah, there'll still be some that'll fail before, but we'll catch most of them, right? And that saved that problem. And just doing a change like that, it's there actually were some articles this year about how close it was. A number in the from the TMC did a study of components. They took about 20 different components and they said, how are these components holding up versus what the manufacturers say versus what the fleets are really expecting? And it was all over the board. Some stuff was a little higher, but majority of it obviously was lower than what the manufacturers. But if we can do this work up front and in conjunction with like oil analysis, right? And say, when do we, are we doing our changes correctly? Is the extension working in our drain levels or is it working against us? What's the deal? Then, we can make a difference, right? We can not waste money by doing something unnecessarily, but we can do it before, it fails. And, sometimes it's a snowballing effect, like one thing breaks and then another thing breaks and then, it just gets worse and worse and worse. Whereas if we do it and we set up guidelines for things that we want to change ahead of time, we can get in better shape. I mean, the goal I've worked with people that you might know a couple of the companies out there. The goal is to get to zero unplanned work. Well, that's almost impossible with today's electronics and all the things. I mean, the amount of components that we have. I was working with one of our very large waste and recycling fleets, and I was struck, and I was told, this is a few years ago, we were talking about the amount of components, and there's within a 5-year time, because of the emissions and everything else, they had added 700 new components to that truck. It was a waste truck picking up, front loading waste truck that picks up every day. That's a lot of componentry, a lot more places for failure. So, the reality of getting to zero total unplanned work is hard, but you can work towards it, right? They can at least be the goal to get to, closer to that, right? And with better scheduling, we're going to have less road calls, less downtime, better warranty compliance, keeping equipment in service. I think also drivers become more confident, or operators of equipment, that it's not going to break down on them. And we all know how competitive that environment is right now for drivers as well. So, once you collect that data, you can get the data, then you can analyze, when do we need to do something about that data? That whatever that is telling us. So for instance, maybe it's some filter and it's saying, you know what, the manufacturer's saying this, but our experience is this. Well, then go with your experience, adjust your preventive maintenance, and then maybe you'll have less unplanned work around whatever that component is.
Excellent. Thank you. And can you just, for our viewers, walk through what we're seeing on the screen here?
Yes. So basically what we're looking at is whatever this is an example of, in my opinion, right? This is something that, why am I seeing a tire with low tread? If they haven't skidded it and there hasn't been an accident or whatever, right? Shouldn't have just been caught on a regular maintenance. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. If you can have a good preventive maintenance program, but if you're not following it, right, you're not getting it done on time, you get results like this. You get like this. Here is a driver report coming out of our system, and it's saying, I got a low tread. How'd you get there? If the driver didn't do something, right, they didn't skid it or whatever, and it just warned, well, either your preventive maintenance cycles aren't correct, right? You're running them too far, or somebody just didn't really do it. They didn't catch it during the inspection. And this is exactly what you'd be trying to avoid with a good, with a good program, right? So, proof that we did the work, and showing somebody that we did the work, I think, I wouldn't want to see this. This is not something I like to see, right? I'd like to see, why did we, I'd like to look at every driver report after the last preventive maintenance was done. Some of them are truly unpreventable. I mean, it's got a hole in the firewall, they ran over something or something, whatever might have happened. And sometimes the compliance is demanded. We had a customer, or have a customer, I should say, a very large customer when it comes to airport ground equipment. And they serve all the major airlines in the world. And they have to show compliance that they did that work on that tug or whatever, that bag cart or whatever it might be, the loaders. There's a lot of safety involved in that, right? And you want to be able to say, yep, this was done on time. And we can prove that that was done on time. So, I know many of you are self-insured or part of an insurance pool, right? But there's still, the underwriters and the reinsurers that are out there that are looking at things. And if you can show that we have a really good program in place, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and tell you you're going to cut your insurance rates, because that's very difficult, right? But you can contain and push back a little bit and say, look, we don't have equipment-related failures, right? We're not having trucks going out and crashing because, the brakes couldn't stop it, or, a piece of suspension cut loose and, we ran into a ditch. So having that information, being able to show that that was done. And then there are regulators that want to be able to see that information. Maybe you're under certain contracts and you need to be able to prove that that was done. Being able to prove that the data was done on time, is a great benefit. And I don't like to always have to say things need to be done on compliance, but we do live in a very compliant world where we want to be able to prove what we've done.
Excellent. Thank you. And I feel like you've already started answering this next question, but if there's more to add, please feel free. What role does data play in helping fleets improve compliance, reduce risk, and cut costs?
Yeah, the trying to reduce the cost, right? Be, just knowing that you're going to do preventive maintenance on time. This number is, I've seen, I want to give an example of a couple of customers. So we're saying that by having your PMs done on time, normally they're seeing a 15% to 20% increase in preventive maintenance. I just saw we put a fairly large customer on this year. It was a big 90 facilities this customer had. That's an impressive company. And they were doing a very, very good job to start with. And they knew it, but they were growing and they had so many companies that they operated in such a big divisions in the way that they worked. They, in 9 months' time, because they gave the tools to companies, they were able to take their compliance from 40%, which doesn't sound great, but that's pretty good for a company that doesn't have a system, to 60% in 9 months, just by their shop managers having an awareness and their dispatch having awareness of the equipment that we need to get in and we need to work on. They're well underway. I mean, that's impressive. And in working with this particular customer, their fleets are actually happy because they know their fleet managers, should say, they know what they've got to do and when they've got to do it. And it's very helpful to be able to have that tool at your fingertips. You know, I've been spoiled. I've had a system my entire career. I've always had some fleet management system, and that goes back to the early 80s. And, you know, I've been very, very lucky. But what we see now versus what the technology that we can see now and what we can determine and figure out when we need to do work, it's so amazing. You know, the information can be overwhelming if you don't have a place that condenses it and brings it into, you know, something that you can work with. Our product, like others out there, you can hook up, like a lot of people love Power BI and all that sort of stuff now, right? You can just bring in dissimilar pieces of information. Maybe some's coming from the operation, some's coming from maintenance, and bring them in, and to be able to see, you know, where we are and, you know, how we're doing with all of that.
Excellent. Thank you. And can you explain for our viewers what we're seeing on the screen here?
Yeah. Yes. So this is essentially a roll up of our analysis, like comes from our data warehouse, right? And it's showing a couple things. You'll notice that these are the vehicle maintenance reporting standards. These are the system codes many of you are familiar with, right? So 17 is tires and trailer and preventive maintenance, and it's showing us what did we spend, right? No doubt to anybody, you know, for this particular customer, it's 2,300 assets. $7.7 million in whatever the time frame we were looking was for tires. Well, no doubt about it, right? But not only where is the money going, right? What's it being driven by? This is interesting here. This one's being driven, this particular thing here, the drivers are reporting a lot of the problems. So we're still we haven't gotten there yet, right? Where maintenance is picking it up before the drivers get to it. This is happening prior to that, or after, I should say, right? So what I would expect is to see this routine increase. This is just by the work reasons, right? The dollars spent by work reason, and the driver reporting stuff to be less, right? But that takes time. That doesn't happen overnight. And to be able to know what's driving it. So by this, it tells me real quick, drivers are still reporting a lot of the problems. And that's what's driving my workload, as opposed to us catching them. Now, that can be several things. I'm not just saying that the shop's not doing their job right. That's not at all. It might be that they can't get their hands on the equipment to work on it, right? Especially, it's a real challenge for us in the construction, aggregates, and all that world where, you know, they're running equipment, and to trying to get a piece of equipment offline to do the maintenance. Of course, then they're going to be screaming when we don't get the work done. So it's you know, it's tough. You know, it's tough to get that information, and sometimes tough to get the equipment from them. I liked when I mentioned Power BI. You know, it's like it's been a changer because people previously, we had to build all kinds of custom reports for people. People build whatever they want now. And, most companies do a lot. We do ourselves internally for our own company outside of maintenance. We do a lot within that to just display. And it's something that people understand, and you don't have to teach them a system or anything like that. And they've got the data at their fingertips. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue to my next question, which is, can you tell us how a fleet maintenance solution like what AMCS offers makes it easier to manage inspections, registrations, and licensing across an entire fleet?
Yep. So the first thing you've got to know is, what do I have, right? I know we did, we had one of our very large dairy customers, and they had about 21,000 assets when we went into them, and they had us scattered across all the, into standalone installations across the whole country here in the US. It took us a year just to really figure out what they really had, right? Because everything was on spreadsheets, everything was in dissimilar systems, right? And of course, do you really think that do you think anything was being done on time? Yeah, some of it, yes. Were we having problems because our registrations and licenses were expiring? Yeah, sometimes even that was happening, right? But think about how much consistency was there to getting preventive maintenance done on time. There was no visibility into it when you get that big, right? But once again, you can be 500 units or less and still be in the same boat, right? As soon as you get past about 50 assets, it gets very difficult to be able to tell, what you're doing and where it's being done, and are we following what we should be doing, right? So, trying to track all the different kinds of preventive maintenance, and what's driving that, right? As I spoke a little earlier about, the equipment's going to tell us more and more as to where maintenance needs to be done. But also there's other business metrics that are out there. I mentioned the construction, right? So Caterpillar for years has been doing, well, you're going to do your oil changes and things like that, fuel filters. You're going to do that on fuel consumption, because fuel consumption is a better indicator of, how the piece of equipment is working, right? So I think having visibility into whatever the fleet is, and to be able to know what's going on, analyze that, and take action on what you're seeing, just like what we're seeing here on the screen, gives you the tools at your fingertips that you need to be able to go forward.
Yeah. I think that's a great point, and it really highlights how compliance programs are only as good as the systems behind them. You mentioned that many fleets lack a solid baseline for tracking results. What challenges do you see when it comes to measuring progress and proving the impact of stronger compliance programs?
That's a great. It's interesting, because one of the problems that we face. I've been doing this a while, right? And one of the problems is sometimes fleets don't even know where they are. There is no baseline to start with. They know this. They know I'm spending X million dollars on parts, but they don't know where those going. Are those going? And you're going to typically have your big five, right? Your tires, your parts, your fluids, your fuel. And those sort of things you're going to know in external work. But outside of that, well, my regular parts, where are they going? Well, we all know what emissions is doing to us. That's just, kills us, right? All the time for people that run on a highway or even off highway at this point. And, knowing where that problem is, but just having a starting point. So, when we first bring customers on, they don't have they have no clue about their PM compliance. They know where they want to be, because it's been a thing in the industry for quite a while now, right? They're trying to get where they want to be, but they don't know exactly where they are. So we put all their schedules in and put all the information in, and then all of a sudden, system saying, okay, you're at 15%. And it's your own. It's not us dictating and saying, hey, this is what you should be doing. It's what you determined is the best PM for your fleet. What does that mean? Does it mean that you don't have enough people to get the job done properly? Maybe, right? Maybe we don't have the resources that we need. Maybe we don't have the shop space we need. Whatever the problem is, we need to look at that and get a base point and get a starting point. And once you're there, I'm not going to sit here and lie to somebody and tell them that instantaneously, when you see your PM compliance trend go up, that you're going to instantly see your costs come down. That's not the case. What you'll see that the cost level, right? And you contain those costs. And think of it like cost avoidance, right? So my rate of increase on parts and labor spend for maintenance as we do better preventive maintenance, because frankly, if you haven't been doing that maintenance, your costs are going to go up in the short term because you're doing work that you were skipping out on. You weren't doing that work. But as time goes, you'll start to see that become that preventive maintenance will pay off, and it'll pay off in a big way because we're doing less. Everybody, only weak players hide in chaos, right? So anybody that loves working in a constant world of breakdowns and all of that other stuff, that's not a good place to be working. Nobody wants to live in that, right? It's just not good. Having something that's predictable, being able to work on it, and that's not really boring. That's a stable thing. It's like we're running a great fleet. We don't have to worry about equipment quitting on us, and being able to see like a 12-month rolling trend of how you're doing is really good. And the visibility, and that visibility across everybody, right? To be able to say, yep, we're doing this, we're spending more in the short term, but we're gonna really level things off, right? So I think just having that visibility and good metrics to be able to follow is the place that you're going to start with.
And it really puts things in perspective. Once companies start tracking the right data and can actually see those improvements, compliance becomes more than a cost control exercise. Now, beyond avoiding fines, how does strong compliance help companies gain a competitive advantage and build customer trust in the marketplace?
Well, think about it, right? Take the waste and recycling. We're very strong in that industry, been doing it a long time. People expect to have their trash and recycling picked up. It's just an expectation. How upset are you when you come home and your can out there is still full?
Hmm.
Nobody picked it up, right? It's horribly frustrating. Right now it's running over. Now you got to pull the thing back in so the dogs don't tear it up at night or whatever the case might be. It's
Hmm.
bad, right? It's bad. It's very frustrating for customers, right? So you want that to be done. What about compliance too, right? You want to know that you can pass an inspection on the side of the road and the driver's not sitting there because sometimes they get charged with defective equipment. It goes against their license in certain states. They don't want that. That's bad for them too, depending on what the case might be. So that whole avoiding fines, the reliability, and drivers have an appreciation. No driver wants to drive for a fleet that constantly breaks down, right? And we don't want to. We want to make sure that whatever we're trying to do, we do. So if it's picking up trash, that's one thing. If it's delivering a product, so think about milk, right? We need that milk to be delivered every day, right? We don't want that truck to be breaking down. You don't think about your milk, right? It just shows up at the stores, right? But when it's not there, you sure know it, right?
Hmm.
Quickly. Same thing for the food and beverage, beer. Imagine if beer was empty on game day. It would be a good thing, right? So people come to expect that stuff to be delivered on time because they're merchants, like take the food and beverage, right? They're delivering not only to grocery stores, but they're delivering to the stores that you go to on the corner, and you expect to be able to pick that up, right? So reliability is very important to the fleets, especially all the way around, right? But especially in certain sectors where people expect equipment to be available for them, right? And I just think it's good with the customer relationship, right? Your trash is going to get picked up.
Hmm.
Your product's going to be delivered. If you use me as a fleet, that I'm going to get your products because it may be dependent that what I carry for you is going to their customer as well, and that they show up on time when they show up. And I think keeping drivers happier. I mean, it's a challenge. I constantly see how it is hard for fleets to get drivers. And the other piece of it is this. I think with the right tools in people's hands these days, um, a mobile device. You think about it. I was working with one of our senior account reps a couple months ago. We were looking at a company, and they had 2,000 mechanics across the United States. And I forgot the exact number, but it was very close to 50% of all of the mechanics are 19 to 29 years old. They've had a phone in their hand since they can remember, right? They've always had something of a phone or a device. They have an expectation. They don't want to write stuff down on pen and paper. They want a good, easy mobile solution, not only to record their work, but to be able to see the history of what's been done to a piece of equipment. It's very, very important to be able to see that. So I think, staying up with that technology, it's important. And, also too, mechanics, just like drivers, they can more or less pick and choose where they're going to work. So you want to give them, just like you like to give them a good shop and good tools to work with, this is just another tool and resource for them to be able to utilize.
Yeah, there's some powerful takeaways there, especially for companies trying to strengthen their position in a competitive market. Now, of course, none of this happens in a vacuum, and choosing the right technology partner does make all the difference. So, John, what top qualities should companies look for in a compliance and fleet management partner?
Well, the number one thing, as I said, we've been doing this 46 years. So we've been through a lot of different iterations and technologies, right? One of the things I'm very proud of is, we are a true SaaS offering, right? Our modern product has been out here in the marketplace live a little over 5 years, built for a SaaS environment. You want that. You want a SOC compliant piece of software. You want it's in an environment that is stable. For instance, our company uses Azure, right? It's the standard, right? And it become very reliable, very, very redundant, can scale, and it will stay modern, right? And that's what you want. Really, you want a SaaS-based system. In the old days, everybody had software and it was installed on your computers, and you had to keep up with all that. Well, that was very 1990s and early 2000s mindset, right? We've had a cloud-based, where the equipment ran in the cloud for. This is hard for me to even believe when I was looking up the number, since 2000. That's 25 years, right? But that was just us hosting in that environment, right? Like in Azure. The modern products are truly built to run in a SaaS environment and to take that, because it makes it easy to scale, easy to keep up, very, very, very secure. And the uptime is truly amazing, right? So for us, it's been really eye-opening, as to what that is. It's not easy to build a true SaaS product. Trust me. Most of my gray hairs has come from working with DevOnThat, with all the challenges. But once you get there, right, and that's what you want to do. I mean, there's a lot of products out there that have been there for a lot of years. There are only a couple out there that are really true modern SaaS products, and you want that. You really want that for all the efficiencies that it gives you. Things like full APIs that let you communicate. We no longer. This is something that's amazing. I was working with somebody the other day. We haven't had to build a custom report for a single customer in over 5 years, because everybody can do it themselves now. You can get right to the data. In the old days, you had to have the database installed in your property on your servers to be able to have direct access. You don't need that anymore. You got the API, you can hit the data warehouse, you can hit all the data, and you can update data. So integrations have become very easy. We rarely even get involved with customers doing integrations now, because the whole package is out there for them. It's very exciting, and it makes it very, very easy, So.
Incredible. Well, just one more question before we shift over to some audience questions. I'd like to wrap up with something actionable for our audience. So what's the first step a fleet owner or company can take to move from reactive compliance to proactive performance?
So the first step is you got to get a great system in place, right? I mean, and you want a system, go with somebody that's been around, right? We've been doing this long enough. We see companies here today, 3 years from now, they're gone, right? So you want to stick with a company. There's a few of us that have been around for a long time that build a really great product for you, will do a good job for you, have good people. But there's very few that are a new, modern platform that things are built on. It's very hard to get there. It's tough. And you want a great system that's solid, that will do what you need it to do. And don't be, we've sold, this number was sort of amazing. We've sold in our years, we've sold over 4,500 organizations, companies, cities, governments, whatever. That's a lot of people. And with that amount out there, and they've been through a lot of different iterations, right? But you want to be on the newest. You really want to be on something, because here's what you get when you deal with a company that has a real focus. We have a big development team that manages this, is solely dedicated to our product. We can innovate, and I talk to customers every day, right? And that's part of my job. And I do an expert series where we ask the expert and we have feedback, and our user board gives us feedback. The advantage that you get from a company like it's focused like us, is that you're getting all of that knowledge from customer. You're getting all that feedback, all that enhancement information. I just went through our release notes. We do monthly releases, right? We're able to do that with no downtime for people because of the operation. And I just went through our release that's happening tomorrow with my series that I did the webinar before this one. It was 5 pages of line by line by line of enhancements. That's a lot in a single month for people, right? And those ideas, even though we've been doing this for 46 years, it still doesn't mean that people don't come up with new ideas for us every single day. We say, you know what, that'd be good. We'll implement that. If you have your own homegrown, it's going to be just that. You have a system that you designed. It's going to be exactly what you designed. And yeah, you can do enhancements over the years. But when you go with a commercial product such as ours, you get to leverage all of that input from other users, and take a good look and say, is the system that we have, is it outdated? Is it secure? That's another thing, right? I mean, unfortunately, we do get customers that were in our old, we haven't sold a premise installed version since 2018, but we still get people that have it running on their own systems and they get hacked or they get attacked or whatever. And so it's you don't want that, right? You want something that's secure and it can pass. I mean, the penetration testing from the outside auditors and all that sort of thing is very important in this time that we live in, that we want to make sure that you have a great tool and that will give you all the information that you want.
Excellent points. Thank you so much, John. So we do have a little bit of time left. Would love to take some questions from our audience. And if you have a question for John, you can enter that using the Q&A widget at the bottom of your screen. So our first one here says, we've noticed younger technicians pick up tech faster than veteran mechanics. Any advice for bridging that skills gap when rolling out new tools?
Yeah, we talked about that a little earlier. That's interesting. Yeah, we used to go from a hour and a half of training a technician or a mechanic how to use the software, because it was kiosk based, or even some of the older mobile technology. You can barely get the words out of your mouth nowadays because all they do is open, oh yeah, I got it figured out, right? It's about 15, 20 minutes. But we do get concerns about, well, I got a whole bunch of older technicians they'll never take to this, and I watched one of my folks in the field, and he says, don't you have a phone in your pocket? And the guy said, yeah. He said, well, if you had that, you figured out how to work your phone, you'll figure this out too. And there's some truth to that. But here's what I find, and I do like this, and this isn't any sales puff or anything about it. I will see that the younger mechanics have to lean on the older mechanics for experience. Like, I don't know how to fix this truck. I don't know how to fix this bus. I can't figure it out. And they've got that knowledge, right? They've got that seasoning that they know, oh, go look at this, or look at that. Likewise, you'll see the younger folks sometimes that they get in a little bit of a bind, and it only lasts a week. It's not very long at all before they get this technology really quick. And they do tend to work together in that area. And it's amazing to watch them work together, and it does me good. I've been doing this my whole life, right? I've never done anything else but fleet maintenance. And it's good to see that, and it happens time and time again. So don't be fearful. I've never, in all the deployments we've done, and our people do 30 a year, each one of them, I've never had a failure where they said the mechanics couldn't do it. And this even goes back to the days when we worked on kiosk and stuff. So it can be done, and you'll find that, they love the new tools, right? The mobile, the new product was made mobile first. Obviously, you can run on a browser, because you can run on both. You could be, I'm at the desk sometimes, I'm in the field sometimes, and just having native apps. I'm going to bring up one other thing on that. I don't know if you've ever been to like a website, like I'll pick on my carrier for airlines, like American Airlines. I pretty much do everything on the app now, book and everything. But you go to their website and their app don't look anything alike. Yeah, same colors, but that's about it, right? They're different. They feel different. With us, it's all the same. It's different screen size, but when I open a work order, that work order is in the same order, the same feel. Everything's exactly the same on the mobile, on the phone, on the tablet, on the browser. It's always the same. They all work together like that. And that's because the mobile is not an add-on. It's an integral part, and it's kept right in line with the browser application as well.
Love that. Thank you so much. Our next question says, our fleet data is scattered across different systems like maintenance logs, telematics, and fuel cards. What's the best way to pull that together into something usable?
Well, I love telematics. Doing this a long time, I go back and they're so much better now. And there's a lot of them, right? There's a lot of, but the integration with the telematics is huge because it brings you three basic things. It brings you the meter readings, so the miles, the hours, the kilometers, whatever you need to be able to, whatever you're running your fleet on, let's say miles, for instance. When you have human beings recording the mileage, like at a fuel island, or they write it on a slip of paper, or they key it in somewhere, you're going to make mistakes. I've made mistakes myself. I remember an assistant one time told me, he said, John, you wrote the wrong mileage down. And you know how important this is. I was like, okay, I don't know why. I just transposed it. Maybe I wasn't thinking well, right? We're all human. We're all going to make that mistake. Let the telematics do the work for you. Let it bring in the meter readings. For us, it's really cool because what we do is we bring in that meter reading every hour that piece of equipment runs, and then we tailor when the PM is going to become due. Let's say the PM's due based on miles. We update that every hour, and we say, oh, okay, its due date is going to be, yes, it's going to be this many miles before it's due, but then we can then determine based on last year's utilization, how long is it going to take to get to that mileage to tailor it down to when do I need to bring that, as opposed to having to do all that in your head, which is how all the old systems work, ours included. It would tell you you've got 1,000 miles till it's due, and then you say, well, it runs this much a day, this is when it'll be due, versus here's the day that PM is going to be due based on how you're using it. So that's number one. Number two is the electronic DVIRs coming in from the drivers, right? That is a massive time saver for fleets because the integration with that is such that it brings in the defect. You can do it just like the paper or whatever. You can say it doesn't need to be corrected for safe operation. You leave it open or close it out and the truck goes on. Or it's fixed on a work order. And then that information with the work order number and the mechanic that signed off on it, all that's sent back. And then the driver reviews it and goes forward, right? Those are huge because you're not having to take from one system, key it into another system, hope you get it right, then update the other system. It's all done together. Or if you're still on paper, I was at one of the largest LTL carriers in the United States recently. They're still on paper. Doesn't surprise me. It's hard. The bigger you are, the harder it is to change. But the inefficiencies of paper are even worse when it comes to that. And then lastly is the diagnostic trouble codes from the telematics. I love those too, because that brings in your, what's going on. So for instance, we're throwing this code and we can already have that sitting there as a work request before they even have to plug in the laptop and figure it out. So having that information is very helpful. And just getting all of the information pulled together into one system. Who wants to have to look in two different systems to be able to see that information, and to have all of that in one place, I think just makes it a whole lot easier.
Well said. Thank you. Our next question says, we've struggled to get consistent PM compliance across multiple locations. Do you have suggestions for keeping everyone accountable without adding more admin work?
Right. So we just talked about how to get meter readings in, right? We can also bring those things in from things like fuel imports and things like that. But telematics is the most precise. You got to get the information in so that you have to do the PM. And then you have to work with your PM program and get it set up to what makes sense. And, and sometimes your fleet is different. So a fleet that's running in, say, Minnesota, that same exact make, model truck might have a very different maintenance cycle if it's running in Houston, Texas, just because of the two different environments that they run in. So once again, whatever your maintenance cycle is for wherever that piece of equipment is running, its vocation that it's running in, and so forth. Once you get that, then measuring PM compliance and then holding people accountable. As I said, I always feel like it's better to reward people for doing that. Just like how good a job are they doing with warranty, right? Are we getting our warranty information back? Rewarding people for all of that sort of stuff is like, okay, you did your work on time. It's better than the other approach, right? Because people will strive to get there. And pretty much everybody in the industry knows that if I can get that work done on time, do the work properly, then we're going to see good results from that in many of the things that we've talked about today. So I just think that's really the key foundation. You need a system that's going to make it easy to measure. I mean, there's nothing for our customers. It's a matter of the meter readings coming in, and then when the work is done and preventive maintenance is done, it updates the system, and customers know. So makes it very
Excellent.
easy for them.
Yeah. Well, that does it for us today. I'd like to thank our speaker, John Davis, for a great discussion today. We appreciate you sharing your insights and expertise with us. And of course, I'd also like to thank our audience for joining us today. We hope to see you again soon. Have a great day.